Hello and welcome to the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports, entertainment, and sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. Let's jump right in with news and notes, where we're taking a closer look at some of the biggest news of the week. This week, we start with the NHL. We're recording this ahead of Game 5. The series is tied at 2 games apiece. Game 5 is in Boston. Game 6 will be back in St. Louis. And if necessary, Game 7 would return to Boston. It's now a best-of-3 series. So, Taylor, what do you think will play out as the rest of the Stanley Cup unfolds, including the game that people who are watching this are going to have already seen?
So we're 2-2. Each team has won one game on the road. I thought it was over when the Bruins won Game 3, 7-2. I was thinking at that point, they probably sucked the life out of the Blues, but they bounced back on Monday night. I still think the Bruins are going to win. They have home ice advantage, obviously, over the remaining 3 games. There's no real rhyme or reason to this. I've been on the anti-betting hockey bandwagon for the entirety of the playoffs just because it's so random. But I felt before the series the Bruins likely had the advantage. It's basically, we're back to the starting point, all tied up. I think they're going to win it as much as I would like to see Boston lose. I just can't see it at this point, even without Chara, who can't speak right now. So.
Do you think it's 6 games or 7 games? I mean, we haven't seen Game 5, so basically you're kind of predicting which will be posted whether after you're either made right or wrong.
Right. I think it goes 7, but yeah, that's my on-the-record prediction.
Rick?
It's hard to think it's not going to go 7 after the first 4 games, the way they're playing. When you think one team's going to win, the other wins. When they juke, they jive like zig and zag. We don't know what's going to happen each game. All we know is it's going to be excitement, and it's going to be fun to watch, and they've made this series enjoyable, even for fans of hockey that aren't fans of these specific teams. And that's what makes the Stanley Cup Finals more fun for everybody who likes to watch it. And for this series, though, I've been rolling with Boston for most of the playoffs now. I still think they have the best goaltender in this series. I think they'll get back on track at home in terms of just limiting some of the scoring opportunities for St. Louis and probably cutting down on a little bit of their mistakes and stuff. They got 2 out of the next 3 games at home. So whether or not they slip up in St. Louis, they still got a chance to close it out in front of their home fans. It's hard to pick against them. In a best of 3, it's hard to pick against the home team, not to mention the fact I've thought they were the best team for a while now. Sticking with the Bruins.
So I was the one of the 3 of us that went with St. Louis ahead of the series, and since we're all just sticking to it, I'm going to stick with it. I would agree that I think it goes 7, but if by the time this is posted, St. Louis wins Game 5, then the Blues will win in 6. I don't know that they will, but I see the Blues winning one of the 2 in Boston and winning at home. That's to stick with my prediction, that's literally what would have to happen. So that's not exactly going out on a limb. That's literally defining how St. Louis could win the series. They'd have to win one in Boston. So I think that if Game 5 does go St. Louis's way, the Blues win in 6. I think if it goes Boston's way, that the Blues win Game 6 and should win Game 7, in my opinion. Game 7s in hockey are really, hate to use the term on a sports betting podcast, but they're basically unpredictable because Game 7s are so final. And when you're talking about a sport like hockey where you're looking at likely a 1, maybe 2 goal differential in a final game. It's hard to, once you got just hey, it's tonight, both seasons end, whatever, you could see 2-1 and it could be at either team.
Or the ref could take it all into their hands and just issue a game misconduct and screw one team completely.
Hashtag not a major it's going back to the first round. Anyway, we're not going to go back to the Sharks and Golden Knights series because that'll open up a can of worms. But let's talk a little racing instead. NASCAR is in Michigan this week.
We're going racing.
Yeah, we're going racing. Firekeepers Casino 400. Kyle Busch, the betting favorite, at plus 250 with Kevin Harvick at plus 500. Martin Truex Jr. at plus 600. And Brad Keselowski at plus 650. Every other driver is plus 1,000 or greater, including both Joey Logano and Chase Elliott sitting right at plus 1,000. Rick, which driver catches your eye this time around?
Michigan's a tough track to predict because of there's a couple of the favorites that really that haven't won this race before. There's a couple of the favorites that haven't even won at this track before. And then you got Kevin Harvick, who's won multiple races at this track, but has yet to win this year. So you got kind of this, conflict going on here. Do you want to roll with someone who has experience at this track and try and bet on him? Or do you want to look at someone else who's driving well but might not have won at this track yet? Last week, I went with Truex to win. In my article, in my preview, I said the safe play is on Kyle Busch to win, but I'm going to go step out on a little bit on a limb and go with Truex because of the momentum he had, and he's raced well at Pocono before. Truex blew an engine halfway through the race, then finished. Kyle Busch went on to win. This week, I don't see Kyle Busch or Martin Truex Jr. winning this race or even competing for the checkered flag. They might be top 5 cars, top 10 cars, but Michigan is a different breed of animal, and I believe it's going to be a different driver who wins in Michigan for the first time. I'm actually, as much as I wanted to go with my hometown driver, Kyle Larson, because he won 3 times. He swept the races in 2017. He won in 2016. He's had a terrible year this year, except for winning the All-Star race. I would love to pick Kyle Larson to win in Michigan. That's his best track. That's where he's raced the best at in his young career. But I'm going out on a limb here, a little bit of a limb. I'm taking Chase Elliott to win in Michigan. I know he's 5th or 6th, depending on the sports betting site, in terms of odds on favorite. So it's not like he's far down. But he's never won at Michigan before. He's had 5 straight top 5 finishes on this year so far. 4th last week in Pocono. He won in Talladega 5 weeks ago, or 5 races ago. And he has an average finish of 5.3 at Michigan for his career. And he's only done 6 races. He's a young driver. He's the best young driver in NASCAR. He's had 3 runner-ups in his short career at Michigan. He's got a great feel for it. Like I said, though, you can pick Logano, you can pick Keselowski, you can pick Harvick. You can pick any of these guys and have, despite what the odds say, realistically, they have about the same amount of chance of winning this week because it is Michigan. Now, when we go next week to Sonoma and we're going on the road course, it's a whole different animal because then half these guys we just mentioned, you just cut them right out. For Michigan, though, it's going to be wide open. I think all 3 of us have a good chance of picking the winner. I'm going Chase Elliott.
So there's kind of a sleeper here. Ryan Blaney, you can get him at plus 2,000. He's finished in the top 10 at this track 3 times since 2015. He hasn't finished worse than number 8 in each of his last 2 races at the track. So plus 2,000 for a guy with that kind of track record seems like a pretty good value. Going back to the Joey Logano, well, you can still get the guy that's second in the standings at plus 1,000 to win the race. It's just good value again. So I'll go out on a limb just based on the thing I read and take Ryan Blaney at plus 2,000.
That's not a bad pick. I had him as a value pick also. It's not a bad pick.
Since this is going to be the one week that Taylor's not going to take him, I'm going to take Joey Logano. I'm going to take the other plus 1,000 because I think it'll be fantastic if he picks up a win the one week that Taylor doesn't pick him. So
hey, he won this race a couple years ago, so he's got a shot.
Yeah. And, as Taylor would usually say week after week, it's Logano when you can get a guy that's that high in the standings with, a pretty decent potential payout. It's a decent wager to take. So we're all going with guys who are in the 4 figures for the, as far as the ratings go. So plus 2,000 for Blaney and then plus 1,000 for Elliott and Logano each. So some pretty decent payouts if any of those 3 pick up a win this weekend. We have no Where's Your Money going this week, but we do have a spread in butter. The NBA Finals currently a 2-1 series with the Toronto Raptors leading after Wednesday night's game in Oakland. For Game 4, the series remains in California. Warriors favored by 5.5 points, again with a minus 110 payout on either side. Taylor, which side of the spread are you taking for Game 4?
It's tough. Obviously, at this point, we don't know if Klay Thompson's playing. We don't know if Kevin Durant's playing. The Warriors are optimistic. They say that both will play. I think Thompson has a better chance of playing than Durant. I think there's a chance he could have played last night. They just wanted to be cautious with it. Obviously, it came back to bite him in the end, but it's tough to imagine them going down 3-1 and losing both home games. So I kind of think the Warriors, they have to bounce back. If they lose Game 4, they're definitely going to lose the series, I think. I think they're losing the series anyway, as I said from the start, but I think the Warriors will win Game 4 and even things up. Curry was phenomenal in Game 3. Obviously, couldn't do it all alone. DeMarcus Cousins was abysmal last night, and Curry just had no help. So I'm not totally sold on this pick. Obviously, if Thompson and Durant are out again, then my tune will change. But I think Clay will play. I think they'll get a lift from that, and I think they'll win Game 4. So I would take Golden State against the spread.
All the Warriors needed was one more scorer to go along with Curry. He had a phenomenal night, proved once again how great of a player he is. And he's, it's kind of crazy how he's overshadowed sometimes by when Durant plays. Then Durant's not there, Thompson's not there, and boom, he goes off for a career high in the playoffs. With that said, I see the Warriors winning. The last thing I read before we went on the air is Klay Thompson could have played last night, but they, like Taylor mentioned, they were just being cautious. He should be ready to go on Friday. With Klay back, Draymond and Curry, I think they have enough firepower to win at home. All they need is Cousins not to play as terrible as he did, which is ironic considering how well he played the game before. With that said, they're going to even the series, but when Durant finally comes back, whether it's Game 4 or Game 5, that's when they're going to take advantage of the series. And it might go 7 now because of this. I didn't think it would, but then again, we couldn't predict that the injuries were going to push the Warriors down more. Nobody thought Klay was going to get hurt in this games. Durant was up and down. I still, until the Warriors lose a series, I'm picking the Warriors.
Yeah, I'm saying the Warriors even -5.5 in this one because the series is over if they lose this game, and I don't think the series is quite over just yet. Yeah, Thompson is expected to be back as of the last update from head coach Steve Kerr, which was as of this recording about, I think, like this morning, so about 2-3 hours ago. And then Kevin Durant is like, oh, he's working out well and he might play. In the same way that I'm not going to pick against the Warriors until they've lost a series, I'm not going to say Durant's going to play until he's actually dressed because, they were saying that against Portland that they were thinking he was like a couple days away. And that was a 4-game sweep. He never played. We're now entering the 4th game of the NBA Finals. They had to wait a while between the end of that series and this one. I mean, what was like, oh, maybe a game or two is now turned in, or, a few games is now turned into, 2 full rounds. So, whether or not he plays Thompson, if you add Klay Thompson into that game, I don't know that they cover a 5.5-point spread that had been set for, 3, but if he contributes 20 and, takes 10 points away from Toronto because he's out there for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, yeah, Golden State still wins that game. That would have been the difference, to Rick's point, is that one more scorer, and that's a very different outcome. So with Thompson expected to play, the Warriors are going to win Game 4, and they should win by at least 6 points. So I'll just I guess we're unanimous in that. It's going to be at least a 6-point victory for Golden State in Game 4. Watch Thompson and Durant both be out or something, and then we're just for recording it early. That's
one thing worth wondering about Durant is that when he does come back, if he comes back, like he's not going to go out there and start playing 40 minutes a night. We see Cousins, he played, I think, like 28 minutes in Game 2, which was, after a month-long layoff, and then he was completely out of gas last night. So it's worth wondering if Durant does come back, is he going to play 25 minutes? Is he going to play?
They just need him for the 4th quarter.
Once he does come back, is he going to have enough stamina to go back out there 2 days later, 3 days later, and give him another 30 minutes? I mean,
just play him in the 4th quarters.
It's worth wondering about.
Yeah, yep. I'd start him, play him a few minutes, let him kind of get warmed up in the first, 6, 8, 10 minutes, whatever it is. And then, just bring him back in the 4th, let him then chill out. But, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's, when you had Klay Thompson back, they're at least, they should win games against Toronto. If you had Thompson in 15 minutes of Durant, they really should be beating the Raptors at that point. But, yeah, it's a good point. We'll see how he does get used and, if he plays. Because, again.
Yeah, I don't think he's coming back. But
there's got to be a prop bet somewhere. We'll have to look that up to see if will Kevin Durant play at any point in this series. which if it's available and you think Toronto's winning Game 4, I'd probably just bet that he's not at that point because Toronto could probably then win Game 5 and end it. But let's go on and give me props, where we look at some prop bets that caught our eye this week in addition to one that we were just I invented. Let's actually begin this week by looking back at some prop bets that just paid out. James Holtzhauer's run as Jeopardy champion came to an end on Monday as a professional sports gambler fell short of Ken Jennings' all-time winnings record by less than he averaged winning per match, so just one game away. With his fall in his 33rd Jeopardy appearance, that means that the under paid out on him breaking Jennings' 74-match win streak, the no paid out on whether or not he'd break Jennings' total winnings record, and he also failed to surpass the insane single-game record that he had set during his first 2 weeks on the show, though he did come close to the 131,000-plus mark that was set. Rick, we'll go to you first for your thoughts, wrapping up Holtzhauer's run and the way that these things paid out.
It's not a surprise that he didn't surpass the 74-game streak. Not many people thought he was going to. I know on here we all agreed that he wasn't going to break that number. We did think that he could break the winnings mark that Jennings set. Not the mark that Rudder set, but the mark that Jennings set. And he fell short of that. But ultimately, I think we had it pretty spot on. Jeopardy James is a gambler. His aggressive style was going to come back to bite him at some point. You can't keep that type of play up for as long as someone like Jennings kept his style of play up. And that was the difference. And even Jeopardy James even said this at the beginning of his run, that he doesn't play like Jennings, that he's not as smart as Jennings. He plays his own style and his own philosophy. And it became popular, and the ratings went up, and all of that went up. Everybody's excited. Now Jeopardy James is gone. Nobody's going to watch Jeopardy anymore. Poor Alex Trebek. Guy's fighting prostate cancer. Embassy cuts out when he says he pray for him. And now Jeopardy James is gone. Jeopardy's going downhill. I don't even want to watch Jeopardy anymore. Nobody's going to watch Jeopardy.
All right, but before I let Taylor jump in, what I do have to say, though, is that because of this run, I've actually started watching Jeopardy episodes that are available on Netflix and Hulu and those things, where it's the old Tournaments of Champions and Teachers Week and, teens and college students and all that stuff. I enjoyed Jeopardy a lot a while ago, and it was Jennings that started that. I don't think it's going to be an immediate fall off. I mean, yeah, sure, the day-to-day ratings may go down, but the fact of the matter is that people have been talking about Jeopardy more consistently in the last, 2 months than they had in 5 years. And I'm sure that there are more people than just me and my fiance who have decided to go and see what Jeopardy tournaments are available on Netflix or Hulu. Just to counter that point. But Rick, if you wanted to respond to that, or Taylor, you can go and give your thoughts on that.
There's other shows I'd rather watch on Netflix and Hulu than old Jeopardy episodes. So I'm going to defer to my colleague.
He's kind of the McGuire and Sosa of Jeopardy. He breathed life back into this old show that, people are now flocking back to watch. I don't know if they'll keep it up, but I'm sure that his run at least introduced a new crowd of sorts to the show that probably never watched, or, if it's on, they're like, oh, this is Jeopardy. I'm not going to watch this at 4:00 in the afternoon. But I'm kind of wondering about the nickname Jeopardy James. Is that real? If that's his real nickname, then we have some serious work to do as far as nicknames go, because that's bottom of the barrel, lazy nickname, A-Rod quality. But he was never going to match the the match record win streak, 74. That we said at the time, like Rick said, that was a long shot. And it seemed like he was always going to flame out pretty spectacularly just because of his aggressive style, doubling down and all that stuff. So it's not surprising that he came up short. But yeah, he made Jeopardy interesting for a while. I don't know when the next time we'll talk about Jeopardy is, but he made it relevant for a while.
As of this recording, the person who beat him, Bettor, has won almost $100,000 in 3 days of winnings. And who knows, this could post and she could have already lost. But it was interesting watching that back. And yeah, the one bet too that I know that I think we agreed on as well was that he was not going to break his own single game mark because it was so optimized that so much had to go perfect for him to get to that 131 whatever, that it was going to be near impossible for him to do that again. Not totally impossible, but more improbable, especially given the odds that him breaking it at the time was favored. It was like something like a plus 200 payout to say that no, he would not break that mark. So hope that you took our advice on that one too. What was really interesting with the way that it ended was Betcher played the same style that he did. And what bit him was the 3 daily doubles, because it wasn't what I had thought going in watching this guy, throughout his run, where he'd go double or nothing a couple times, in double Jeopardy and miss, or would try to double up or bet too high or something like that on Final Jeopardy. He got to control the board first. Very first clue he picked in the first round was the daily double, so he couldn't wager. He only won $1,000, and that was what the space was worth. So basically a worthless pick based on his strategy. And then the second round, Betcher got both daily doubles, doubled up the first time, which is not something you typically see other competitors do. But she was down by like $3,000 or $4,000 to Holtzauer, and she wagered everything and wound up by like $4,000 or $5,000. And then she got it again later while she had a lead and doubled her lead. So he got beat because she played his strategy and beat him to the daily doubles, and also seemed to be really good at buzzing in, because that was something he's talked about a lot with watching the light or whatever it is on the top of the board, where I think unlike in any of the other games, he was getting beat to the buzzer much more often, because all three contestants had, decent sums given what Holtzauer typically did. But yeah, it was an incredible run to watch, but I think it was better to see, or at least more interesting to see, someone beat him by playing his style against him than it would have been to see him flame out and miss, 2 daily doubles trying to double up, going from 20 to 0 or something like that in the second round. Mm-hmm. That's just my thought on it, though.
We're not going to talk Jeopardy again until he takes on Jennings in a tournament.
That is going to be fun.
Jeopardy is a ghost town.
I don't know about that, but
the ship is sinking.
Let's move on to a series that is literally over. Game of Thrones wrapped up, but there are still ways to wager on Westeros. Rick recently wrote an article on the matter, available at gamblingsites.org, including whether or not a prequel will air in 2020, whether or not the Night King will be featured in the first episode of a prequel, and if a spinoff will arrive focusing on either Arya Stark or Jon Snow by 2021. Rick, which of these wagers is the most eye-catching or appealing for you from a betting perspective? Since we didn't want to talk about one show that's still airing that is over, but let's talk about this show that's been over for 3 weeks.
First of all, don't get me started on that terrible series finale, okay? I'm going to try and put that aside so I can move on. But in the series finale, there was multiple things that took place. The main Stark characters all went into their separate directions. And because of the directions they went in, fans are, clamoring. People are speculating and hoping that Jon Snow will get a series or Arya Stark will get a series. For me, Jon Snow, there's no reason for him to get a series, because it almost feels like his whole storyline just came full circle. He brought the people back into the forest. They can be the children of the forest again, or whatever you want to go in that regard, right? But he had his whole rise and fall and rise again. We got satisfaction with this storyline. We did not get satisfaction with Arya Stark. It almost felt like things were getting even better with her in terms of killing the Night King and wanting to kill Cersei. And now she's going to explore what's west of Westeros. For a lot of people, that's interesting. Yet, the head of HBO's program said, no, we're not going to do that show. Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. There is going to be a prequel. The problem is when that comes out. And then when it does come out, are they going to have the Night King involved in it or not? In my opinion, they have to have the story of the Night King involved to some degree, whether it's the guy as a man before he becomes the Night King, whether it's early days of the Night King, whether it's 1,000 years after he's already reigning as Night King, whatever it is. That's the one bet that intrigues me the most out of all the prop bets, all the spin-offs, all the prequels, all the sequels, whatever you want to call it. First of all, they're saying that if any show comes out, it's going to end up being a prequel. In the near future, it's just going to be a prequel. That's what they want to do. That's what HBO is going to do. They don't want to take characters that were so well done already, the storylines that were so well done according to them, and add to it, especially when the producers, the directors, and the writers who were involved in the main series, Game of Thrones, weren't going to be involved in the sequels. So they eliminate that. So they had 4 or 5 scripts that were, and then it got narrowed down to 3, but all of them are prequels. They already have one of them that's supposed to be shooting by later this year. There's details about that in my article and online about what that show is going to be a little bit about. And it's supposed to be set thousands of years back in time before any of this stuff that we've seen in Game of Thrones existed, except for maybe a dragon and a Night King. Because that's how far back you are going, supposedly. With that said, it's the Night King. They missed the boat on doing more with the Night King in the Game of Thrones series, in my opinion. They could have done more. He was one of the coolest characters they had in the entire series. And what would make a prequel great is if they focused a little bit more on him, because that'll draw the fans in, not to mention the diehard fans that will want to see anything associated with Game of Thrones. Night King. That's where I'm going. That was the one that excited me the most. I just hope the series isn't a dud like Game of Thrones was in their finale.
So among the betting options, you have, will the Game of Thrones prequel air in 2020? That seems like an easy no. The show takes forever to film. It took them years just to film the last season, which was only 6 episodes. So no at -200 seems like a pretty easy bet there. The one bet that you liked, like you said, was the Night King to be involved at -165. No on the Night King being involved in the first episodes +125. I really have no idea what to expect. It seems like they don't want to involve people that were involved in the actual series in the prequel. So I think there's merit to taking yes there at -165. It's just not good value. All the other ones, though, will Arya Stark be involved? Will Jon Snow be involved? It'd be fun, like you said, to see them involved, but the heavy favorites are no on both, and I don't really see any way around that unless they just completely lied about what they're planning on doing with it. So I'm thinking no on all those, which kind of makes it lame to bet on since there's no value anywhere, but that just seems to be the logical way to go.
I'll defer to you guys on those, but what I would really love to see if they're going to do a prequel and they wanted to do something that would be kind of leading into the start of the series is I would love to see like a 3-part movie. Shoot it like Lord of the Rings, where you shoot all 3 simultaneously, release one every year. You could basically release it. It would also be a great way of holding people over, kind of like the Star Wars stories were in theory between the episodic ones. Because if grab some of the actors. I want to see the war. I want to see the overthrow that led to Robert Baratheon being the king, the Lannister. That whole situation. I want to see everybody being. I want to see that. It kind of feels like, as a Star Wars fan, like it would be seeing what was the first Rogue One, kind of.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to go all the way back to the beginning. They're not even going to.
But see, I don't need to do that. Like,
the only characters that could be that old would be the Night King and a dragon, and that's why people are hoping that one of especially the Night King, could be involved, because that goes all the way back to the beginning, to when first man came into that whole region, to Westeros and everything around there, and when they created the Night King and the White Walkers in the first place to protect them against the invasion of the men. If you're not going to start there, then where are you going to start? You're just going to pick a random date?
Well, what I'm saying is that you could do that for the TV series, but I would love to see a Lord of the Rings style movie. I was actually not really a fan of that trilogy, but kind of shooting 3 movies at once.
Yeah.
Putting it up, releasing it as an immediate prequel, a lead into the TV series Game of Thrones. Something that would lead you to, lead up to like the birth of Joffrey, essentially, and that sort of thing. That's kind of where I would like to see. If they wanted to do a movie or a 3-part movie, I think that seeing that uprising, seeing Winterfell being defended and seeing Baratheon taking over would be an interesting way to go about it. And it would be the one problem with it is that the way that the series is I don't know that they could get a rating that would be worth releasing it in the theaters.
Yeah.
So that would be the one hang up on that. But let's move on to easy money. Everyone loves some easy money. So Taylor, what's your easy money lock of the week?
So we're going to what I can only assume is Rick's favorite sporting event. The Women's World Cup gets underway this week. The United States is a heavy favorite to repeat as champions. They open group play on June 11th with a match against Thailand. The USA is a 4.5 goal favorite, which is huge for a soccer game. It's actually minus 123, the payout on them covering that spread. They're playing Thailand. Thailand made their World Cup debut in 2015. They were pretty overmatched. They got crushed 4-0 by Germany and Norway, who are two of the best teams in the world. The odds makers expect a similarly lopsided result here. So I think the U.S. gets off on the right foot. I think they have no qualms about just running up the score here. Goal differential is a thing. So easy money will be the USA women to whip Thailand by at least 4.5 goals.
Rick, what do you got?
This weekend's gathering of events, sporting events and stuff, there's a lot of disparity in betting odds. If we want to look at the wrestling show coming tomorrow in Saudi Arabia, most of the matches had huge disparity in betting odds because people were thinking, oh, this guy's going to win, that guy's going to win. Tennis tomorrow, the semifinals of French Open. One guy's a clear-cut favorite. The other two are very close. NASCAR is all over the place this weekend. So for me, I feel like the best, smartest choice is heading to the UFC. And I don't want to give everything away now because I know we're going to talk about it in a little bit. But I really like the odds that Cejudo is getting in the main event of UFC 238. He's the underdog. And I honestly believe he's going to win. I feel like that is easy money right there. And I'll explain it further more when we get into it. But I really like that one.
Really quick, we do the opposite, clear as mud. Game fighter event seems so unpredictable. We're keeping clear away from betting on it. Rick, what's your pick here?
And that's what I was just alluding to. Super Showdown for WWE in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, Friday. This is, as we've talked about on the payoff, as we talked about in real life, it's a glorified house show. Anything could happen. The favorites have massive odds. The underdogs, you can't pick them to win. The battle royals all over the place. And then you have a couple matches where the odds are really close, but you don't know which guy's going to win. It's not even worth betting on, right? For the most part. There's a couple matches that offer value, but for the most part, it's too unpredictable. And if it's too unpredictable, in my opinion, you stay away from it.
You can check out the payoff on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for more on that. Taylor, what do you got?
Going back to the Women's World Cup, we have England taking on Scotland, another group match. I talked about Scotland in our Women's World Cup preview video. They're a defensive-minded team that'll just park the bus and hit you on the counter. England's heavily favored, minus 454. I'm seeing at my bookie on the money line, but I kind of like Scotland in general as an underdog. Plus 1190, you can get them on the money line. England would be a tempting favorite to take, but I think I'd avoid that just because I have respect for Scotland.
It's that time of the podcast where Rick probably either visibly rolls his eyes at me or just does it in his head, and that's because it's time for Show Me the Money! Lines where we look ahead to this weekend's games and events and their current money lines. This week, let's start with tennis. French Open is entering the semifinal round of play. Got a matchup that always brings the eyeballs. It's Roger Federer versus Rafael Nadal. Line has Nadal heavily favored at minus 909. Federer plus 491. Who are you taking, Rick?
Oh, God. You have to go with Nadal here. The money line for Nadal isn't worth it, but it's the whole emotion and sentimentality and just everything about this matchup because these are two of the best tennis players of this era and possibly any era. Right now, Federer leads all tennis players with the most Grand Slams for the career. Nadal is 2, Djokovic is 3, and they're all competing in the Final Four of the French Open. So one of those 3 will most likely win it. As you recall, I picked Djokovic to upset Nadal, but it's pretty much gone status quo for the men. The top 4 players are in the semifinals, which is what we like to see, because now it's going to be the best is going to win, which is not the case for the women. Not at all, not even close. Nadal has owned Federer in the French Open. It's not even close. He's like 5-0 at Roland Garros. He's going to make it 6-0. As much as I would like to see Roger Federer win, I'm a big fan of Federer. I've been a big fan of his for a long time. I love his professionalism. I love his class. He acts like he's been there before when he wins. He's not a schmuck. Some of these other athletes are. I would love to see him win. It's not going to happen. It's Nadal.
I think that was my favorite moment we've ever had on the show.
We need a Yiddish word of the show every week.
Yeah, let's introduce one every week, a new one. We'll have a spelling bee. Yeah, if you're betting on this, you're obviously not betting on Nadal at minus 909, but he is going to win. I guess if you were to bet on this as a flyer, you take a shot on Federer, the best player of all time, possibly at plus 491. But like Rick said, Nadal on clay is basically easy money, so it's probably just a bet I'd stay away from altogether.
Yeah, echoing exactly what Taylor said. It's minus 909 is not worth the bet, but it's going to be Nadal, so it's probably not worth the wager either way. If you want to throw a few dollars at Federer just because, basically getting a 5-to-1 payout, you're looking at basically try to turn, your dollar menu item into an extra value meal, then sure, go for it. But beyond that, it's because it's going to be Nadal, but Federer is the only one that has anything worth has a number that's even remotely close to being worth wagering on.
I would tell people to put your money on a semifinal. The odds will be closer. It'll be a more competitive match.
Yeah, I agree with that. Belmont Stakes this weekend. No Triple Crown was possible this year, even before the second leg of it started. So it's understandable if this race is kind of sneaking up on you. Taylor, which horse or horses are grabbing your attention on the money lines?
So Tacitus seems to be the favorite right now. I'm seeing plus 175. Tacitus finished third at the Derby after the DQ. Didn't run the Preakness. I liked Tacitus going into the Derby, so I'm fine with that at the Belmont. War of Will, the Preakness winner at plus 200 is fine. It's probably going to be one of those two. The odds get pretty long once you get past those two. So, we saw in the Derby that the chalk definitely doesn't always hold, but I would just probably take a shot on one of those two. I'd lean Tacitus just because that's a horse I liked previously, and I trust myself on that. So, why not?
Could this be the most boring Belmont Stakes in recent memory? Like, I can't remember a time where nobody even cared about the third leg of the Triple Crown. Most people weren't even talking about it. Like you said, it snuck up on us because nobody cared. After the whole debacle with the Derby and then no chance at a Triple Crown and the Preakness didn't feel like it lived up to the hype. I'm going with Tacitus because Taylor said so, and our good buddy Jim, one of our colleagues, have said so. And you know what? Honestly, this race just doesn't matter much to me. I'd rather be watching the French Open or NASCAR.
Yeah, Jim Baviglia, you can check out on the Odds on Favorites YouTube channel. There is a video where he helped break it all down. Tacitus is his pick. He finished third in the Derby. He's a better horse for the distance, and this is the distance leg of the Triple Crown. He also said the horse Tax was interesting because Tax ran in the Derby, was a very disappointing horse in the Derby. They've changed the jockey, and they basically said, it was just something was off where it just didn't get going. So that's kind of the long shot. I'm agreeing with Jim Avila on those two. I'm going to trust his judgment on that. War of Will is an interesting one, as well as Taylor had pointed out. So we'll see. This is one of those, it just, when you DQ the horse that finished in first in the Derby, and then that horse, the horses that technically finished first, second, and third, all decide to skip the second leg of the Triple Crown. It's hard to then get really excited about the third leg because there was no carryover. There was nothing from the Derby that happened that carried over storyline-wise into the Preakness. So there was nothing to go off of. It's just like the third big horse race of the year with no time.
You know, we just spoke about the French Open. You know, the Grand Slam of each calendar year, there's 4 big events. So even if someone's still not going for the sweep, Djokovic is though right now, but if someone's still not going for the Grand Slam, the sweep of all 4 of the major tennis tournaments, each tournament is still interesting in itself, still has enough storyline in itself to captivate an audience. This race has nothing, nada. I feel like they shouldn't even air it. Like, they should just stream it, or people should watch it when it's already happened. Like, other than the bettors, which I know we're talking to them, everybody else, nobody cares. Nobody cares. That because they did that, though. It wasn't because people just don't care. It's because they did that with the whole debacle. It was a debacle at the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky debacle.
So the Belmont Stakes, it's the Jeopardy of sporting events. It's over.
Right now, yes, it's done. Like, Jeopardy James is gone. There's no reason to watch the Belmont Stakes or Jeopardy. If there was a horse race Jeopardy in this race, I would bet on that one.
Let's see James Holtzhauer as a jockey for the Belmont Stakes. Let's do a promotion thing. Bring both back. And then a horse, the winner of the race, gets to be a guest star. They get to be the third contestant on Jeopardy next week.
And they're riding a horse named Game of Thrones.
Just all coming together. This sounds like a foolproof plan. How has nobody thought of this before? UFC returns to pay-per-view this weekend in Chicago, Illinois. There are a few matches with some good betting opportunities. UFC 238, headlined by Henry Cejudo and Marlon Moraes. The Moraes favorite at -130, Cejudo at even money, +100. Co-main event features Valentina Shevchenko at a whopping -1360. And opponent Jessica Ai, a dramatic underdog at +840. We'll go deep into this card on This Week in Combat Sports, where you can find here on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel with me and Rick. Rick, which fight are you most interested in betting on from this card? You can go top to bottom wherever you want to find it.
Since we're only talking about betting, I'm going with the main event. If we were talking about which fight I'm most excited about, it's obviously the Cowboy versus Ferguson. I love this matchup. I can't wait to see this fight. I think it's going to be a bloodbath, or someone's going to get knocked out right away. But for the betting's sake, it's got to be the main event. When you have a current champ in Cejudo, who is the underdog, and you're getting even money on it, it's like Taylor's argument, and we've discussed with Logano in NASCAR, the odds he gets despite being one of the best drivers each and every week, defending champion of NASCAR and stuff. Cejudo's a featherweight champion. He's going for the vacant belt for the bantamweight. He just beat the former bantamweight champ, who had the title stripped from him because he failed a drug test. Cejudo beat arguably the greatest featherweight of all time, Demetrius Johnson. He's an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, and he's shown a striking capability that nobody thought he would have. He comes into a matchup with a guy that has not scary knockout power, and that's why he's favored, because he's a better striker. But if Cejudo gets this to match to the ground, he's going to win it. And that's why I believe he's got a lot of value coming into this. I think he has a great shot at winning. He has a lot of confidence coming in. If he can just avoid the power punches or the power strikes of his opponent, he should win this fight. And I like the betting value here. I like the fact he's even. And for me, I believe that offers the best betting value pretty much on the whole entire card.
Taylor?
Yeah, that's a pretty good argument. If you're getting a reigning champ at basically even money as a slight underdog, I think that's something you jump on. The other card was Shevchenko -1400. That's obviously not something you're touching. Jessica Ai, which seems like a definite fake name, +700, I guess. It's kind of like the Federer thing. Like, as a flyer, you can take a shot on that always. Just, we saw last week that anything can happen if people are fighting each other. So I don't hate that, but I'll just side with Rick. He knows what he's talking about.
Sometimes.
And he's not a schmuck.
Not a schmuck. Anything.
I do like that betting line on the main event. By the way, there's a shift. Jessica Ai now +840. So it's even more dramatic. Just in the last 6 hours or so, that line has shifted tremendously.
There's no other fight on that card that you would take a flyer on more than Jessica Ai.
Yeah.
Her odds or it's worth the risk if you're a risk taker looking for a potential upset pick.
The other women's match that's high up on the card is also a big gap. The names are slipping my mind at the moment on it. But if you're going to take a flyer, what I would say is I would sooner, if you're betting, let's say $20, I would sooner bet $10 on each of the underdogs in the women's matches than betting 20 on either of the favorites, especially if, Shevchenko is going to get you, $1? $1.50 back on a $20 wager. So, I'm but yeah, the main event has the best betting odds when it comes to, it's that idea about if you can get one of the best at a really good potential payout, just like Taylor says with Logano, just like I say when Golden State is even money or thereabouts at any point, whether you think they're going to win or not, it's worth the wager because they are a really good competitor team, whatever it may be. I'm just going to agree with the main event. I would also say if you're a risk taker, or if you're considering betting on the women's fights that are on the main card, rather than betting on one of the two that are clearly favored to win, split your wager between the other two and hope for a bigger payout than looking to win like $2 for that, what is expected to happening. We are at the time of the podcast for my favorite segment of the week. It's what we just call Whoops, our chance to come clean about something we projected, predicted, or pushed that we were really wrong about, and then we have a chance to explain ourselves. I'm going to go first to get us going. It's to the NHL. When we did our game pick last week, it was for Game 3 of the Blues and Bruins. I think that I may have been the only one, I don't remember fully, but I had picked St. Louis to win that game. Boston went on to win 7-2, so a shellacking. So a 7-2 win for Boston was clearly not a Blues victory. It was not even close. Binnington got chased in the game. The Blues did win Game 4, 4-2, so the series is still even. But that was my whoops. Essentially, I thought that there was no way that coming off an overtime win in Game 2 and returning home that St. Louis would have that lull, but instead it just energized Boston. And they came out on fire, having lost a game at home and just ran roughshod over the Blues in that game. So, Rick, what is your whoops of the week this week?
I kind of touched on it a little bit. I'm not going to take a big whoops on the NASCAR because I did say in my article that the safe play and the smart bet was Kyle Busch. And if you wanted to be a little riskier, go with Truex because of the recent success he's had there and the momentum he's had on the season, winning 3 out of 5 races. I don't feel that bad about that, okay? You know what? I'm not even going to say whoops on that. I'm going to say, I guess I'm going to have to go whoops for the women's French Open bracket. But I want to say this, though, okay? I kept telling everybody the unpredictability of this, the stacked competition that they had in the upper bracket with Osaka, Serena, Halep, and on and on and on and on. They basically all wiped each other out. You have a 17-year-old American girl in the semifinals. Nobody predicted she would be in the semifinals. Probably not even her family. Probably not even her BFFs as they Snapchat each other all day from France and wherever else she's from in America. And Murrah. The unpredictable nature of the Women's French Open, it's been year after year after year, except for when Serena's been dominant. Okay? I picked Kiki to win it all. I had a feeling that it was going to be somebody that hasn't won before. I had a feeling it was going to be somebody that wasn't ranked in the top 2, 3, 4, or Serena. I went with Kiki because she's playing great this year. She's come on strong over the last year. She's a late bloomer. She was playing well in clay court season heading into this tournament. And guess what happened? Kiki pulled out of the tournament because of diarrhea. Yes, because of diarrhea. Who can predict diarrhea? Okay, well, it's a little bit more than that. She was sick. Whoops. Kiki had diarrhea.
That is the most off-the-wall whoops we've had, where it went from Okay, so here's where I messed up to those millennials and their cell phones to an ad for Pepto-Bismol essentially.
Imodium AD.
Imodium AD also, yeah. But anyway, Taylor, it's time for you to come clean, and if you can hold a candle to that version of whoops, give it a shot.
I mean, going second's always putting me at a major disadvantage whenever Rick takes the cake first, but
I'll reverse it next week.
I said last week that the Champions League final would go over 2.5 goals. It did not. It was a 2-0 win for Liverpool. I called Liverpool winning, which was the most likely thing to happen based on the odds. So at least I had that. But I whiffed on the over. I thought it would be a high-scoring, high-octane game. It was the opposite. Liverpool scored within the first 2 minutes and then pretty much held a defensive form the rest of the game before scoring another one at the end. So my whoops will not be as dramatic as Rick's, which went all over the map. But I will take I'll take the L on that.
All right, well, we're about to close the window here, so one last chance to get some things in. The closing line is set. Looking for some final thoughts. Taylor, we're going to let you go first on this one here, so this way you don't have to follow whatever drama Rick decides to go with. So, take it away. What do you got for us?
I'll just go back to the Women's World Cup. You can see my full thoughts of this on our Women's World Cup preview video posted earlier in the week, available on our YouTube channel. But I think the USA will not win the Women's World Cup. I think France as a host has a decent shot. I think England as an underdog is interesting. Scotland, if you're super frisky, their odds are over plus 100,000 to win. Pretty unlikely, but the payout's pretty nice if lightning strikes. So I'd be willing to get bold with my bets. I think the USA at plus 250, that's not great value, especially since the World Cup is being held in France. So host nation always tends to have something of an advantage. So I think I'd take France before I took the USA, as much as it pains me to say.
All right, Rick, you get to be the last one to go this week, so finish us out strong.
I'd like to tell everybody I absolutely loved the Deadwood movie from last Friday. It was amazing. I watched it 4 times already. Couldn't get enough of it. Can't wait to go to Deadwood myself. Great job. You know what, Game of Thrones, you should have took a lesson from David Milch and Deadwood. With that said, this is an exciting week, and we have a few events coming up that are going to be great. We didn't even get to talk about cycling on this episode, but you got the Criterium de Dauphiné coming up starting Sunday. It is the precursor. It's basically the litmus test heading into the Tour de France, which starts in the beginning of July, actually about 4 weeks from now, which is going to be great. We're going to be talking about the Tour de France every week, or at least I'm going to be talking about the Tour de France every week. So we got the bike race. We got the big WWE event tomorrow from Saudi Arabia, even though I hate the fact they go to Saudi Arabia because they don't let women do anything over there. I mean, come on now, seriously. And then we got the big UFC event and the French Open. These 2 events in themselves have their own, unique excitement and experience in watching it. I know somebody, that I won't mention any names, is going to be there live to watch the UFC event. That person's going to have a lot of fun, especially if the Cowboy pulls off the upset. I'm so fired up for Cowboy Ferguson. This is a great fight. This is what happens when you have promoters that actually make fights that fans care about and not the nonsense that just goes on and on and on. And then you have Ruiz come out looking like a fat doughboy pulling off the biggest upset since Buster Douglas. And you just have shenanigans going everybody, and everybody's shocked because there's no more super fights because promoters suck in boxing. But at least in MMA, they get it right half the time. And then the French Open. Taylor, the French Open. I got to tell you this. I got to get this off my chest before the windows close. If it's Nadal versus Djokovic, the ratings are going to be up. It's going to be a lot of betting on it. It's going to be an excitement. That's the best rivalry in tennis history. I put it even above whoever McEnroe played against, because I love McEnroe. He's my favorite tennis player of all time. Nadal and Djokovic have played against each other over 50 times. They played against each other in about a dozen different Grand Slams. They're going to play against each other again in this Grand Slam, and it's going to be in the final, and they're going to be playing for history. Nadal wants to extend his history. Djokovic wants to get the calendar career Grand Slam for the 2nd time in his career. It's going to be exciting if those 2 win their matches tomorrow, which I believe they will. A lot going on this weekend. I'm fired up. I can't wait. And one more thing. One more thing.
Thank God I went first.
I'm going to see Goonies Sunday at the theater in my local town over here. They're replaying it. It's the first time I get to see it on the big screen since I was a kid and it came out originally. I'm pumped for that too.
All right.
I got my Superman shirt on, paying homage to Sloth.
I had so much to respond to with what you said, and I don't know if I was gonna. I don't even remember what I was gonna. Oh, I was gonna mention Agassi and Sampras if you were looking for other kind of rivalries going back, but
McEnroe and Connors.
McEnroe-Connors, McEnroe-Borg were probably the best.
I remember where you started with that because I had the UFC event. Yeah, this UFC card is. I was looking at it even just earlier today, just looking at it from the top and starting being like, "Ooh, that's a really good main event. Ooh, that's a really interesting co-main event."
Yep.
The third match. Oh, okay, this is great. And you go all the way down, and because I was at the UFC Chicago event last year, and one of my favorite matches to watch was Tai Tuivasa. He won. He's just a fun guy to watch on his entrance, on his exit, and he's it's just haymakers. And he's like sixth from the top, and they all get better. So this is going to be an unbelievable pay-per-view.
Gonna be great.
It's it's unreal. This will be the third time I get to see Tai Tuivasa fight in person. Being against Junior Dos Santos in Australia late last year. So So I second what Rick said on that. At the beginning of his 10-minute closing line there in 50th topic.
I held the window open. They weren't closing it on me.
We were trying to jam it down, and it was just you had like your hand in there, just
my fingers are sneaking under.
Oh yeah, it was just being smashed by the window over and over, and it just no. It's just come, sir. We've got to go home. We're done. Speaking of, that'll do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. Check out gamblingsites.org for plenty more from these guys here. They've been Taylor Smith and Rick Rockwell. I'm Drew Goldfarb. We will see you next time.